How far are you willing to let technology infiltrate and impose on the liberty and privacy of individuals? Proposition allows existing biases towards marginalized groups to now be systematically valid and included in investigations. To put them on a heat list just because they live in an unfortunate block or they're related to the wrong people, just because they dress the same or talk the same or look the same to those of operating members in drug cartels. Does it actually work to solve crime? And do you really have the right to impose such measures in the name of the so-called greater good? Judge, these are the questions we want to ask you today. Opposition is going to forward you three arguments. Firstly, why data-driven policing is a threat to constitutional rights. Secondly, why it is an unreliable form of policing. And thirdly, how it uniquely justifies and emboldens racist policing. But before that, I want to do a couple of things. Firstly, I think proposition is flawed in the fact that it's extremely problematic how quickly they drop the importance of individual privacy and rights, considering that most of their practical benefits include cooperation from people, and it heavily depends on how law enforcement not abuse such power. A crucial characterization, therefore, is the fact that in areas with high crime rates, they usually have already a bad existing relationship or a bad trust towards law enforcement. This is mostly because of historical reasons such as police brutality or long-term discrimination and oppression, which means there's a severe underlying issue with these minorities and the people who we are debating about and who we believe are uniquely and substantially harmed under their side. This system is tailor-made to further victimize communities that are already over-policed, namely communities of color, unhoused individuals, and immigrants, by using the cloak of scientific legitimacy and the supposed unbiased nature of data. If I can prove to you either that this should be the focus of the debate or that the benefits of data-driven policing given by proposition is untrue, you must oppose. On opposition, we oppose any use of data-driven policing. We support other vital goals such as like building community trust through community policings or concentrating on eliminating the use of excessive force and reducing other coercive tactics that exist today. Right. To the first argument then, or all rebuttals are integrated. To the first argument, why data-driven policing is a threat to constitutional rights. What I want to do here is assess the principle of privacy and consent. The first thing to note, we think that an individual should not have their presumptions of innocence eroded because of a casual acquaintance, a family member, or a neighbor commits a crime. Because we're living in a democratic states that value the regard of a person's autonomy over their privacy is prioritized and it exists, unless for some reason the proposition can prove to us that we should be debating in countries like Russia or North Korea, right? Secondly, we would argue that this uniquely violates any and all concepts of consent from people. A, because most people who are born in that area and have lived there their whole life do not consent to living there, perhaps maybe because of financial limitations to move or cultural associations within that area. But even to the people who chose to be there, this individual does not consent to have their personal information and their day-to-day life monitored by the police. And this is where PM told you that, oh, people don't really care about consent anymore. And she gave the example of technology infiltration, such as whether we agree or disagree towards certain things when we download applications, or for example, security checks after 9/11. First of all, even if you don't read terms and conditions, you still have the choice to ultimately agree or disagree. Secondly, in security checks after 9/11, people are generally aware that police are going to enter their house. But when you are investigating, and this is key, not only do they watch over you like an eagle, but according to Rochelle, police has access to your personal sensitive information, including medical records of people who presumably have given the police no reason to be suspicious over them other than the fact that the data says they have a 40% chance of knowing something about someone because they live in the same block. The people don't know that the police are looking for them and looking at this data. This is a major violation of privacy. We do not think that the use of, and I quote, diverse engineers behind the science technology will be able to make up for it or make sure that there is no abuse, because the abuse has started the moment you enforce this system. But secondly, I think an important difference is under a criminal investigation, the observation they conduct towards you is in the interest of deciding whether or not you are guilty or complicit in a crime, not an algorithm of whether or not you will like a recommended YouTube video, for example. And this is important because this means that proposition's principle defense cannot stand simply because of the fact that there are factors of interest such as wanting to conclude the case as soon as possible or wanting to make sure the $1 million investment towards the system does not go to waste can be substantial enough where more bias enters and innocent people can be persecuted. The third thing I want to talk about is again quoting PM. In the level of priorities, people's privacies are not important in comparison to what goes on in high crime rate areas. No, we think it's the same parallel of killing one to save five, but in this case, we don't actually know whether the 5 people are saved. We think there should be no circumstance where an individual, especially an innocent one, has to give up their autonomy and rights for the greater good of others. Secondly, what it does is this dehumanizes people. It turns people into data, into statistics on a screen. It turns people into anomalies that must be discarded or taken care of. We think that is extremely problematic when you are policing human beings. We think, if anything, these people value privacy more than the average individual because they have no choice but to be extra wary of who they trust, given the environment they live in. Secondly, why this is an unreliable form of policing, especially in areas of high crime rates. Proposition told us that this system is specifically helpful in fast-paced crimes and in crimes that are difficult to get witnesses. Let's break down why this is untrue. Firstly, we think that predictive policing is a self-fulfilling prophecy. For instance, if a number of crimes have been committed in alleyways on Thursdays, the algorithm might tell a department that they should dispatch officers to alleyways every Thursday. Of course, this means that the police are predisposed to be suspicious of everyone who happens to be in that area at that time. If police focus their efforts in one neighborhood and arrest dozens of people there during the span of a week, the data will reflect that area as a hotbed of criminal activity. So it doesn't actually give accurate data, right? Secondly, this system only considers reported crimes, which means that neighborhoods and communities where the police are called more often sees a higher likelihood of having predicting technology concentrate resources there. The issue with that is the fact that not all crimes are recorded, right? This probably means that the people who are unwilling to cooperate with the police and status quo regarding drug cartels and whatnot that Rochelle told us are still not going to cooperate with the police anyway under proposition, to the extent where, based on my previous point, shows to you why they're even more discouraged to cooperate with this police who are endlessly spying and arresting their family members for no reason, ultimately creating an even bigger divide and barrier of trust between both sides. Lastly, why this justifies racist policing. We think that police are already policing minority neighborhoods and arresting people for things that might have gone unnoticed or reported less in less heavily patrolled neighborhoods. They arrest black people for parking tickets. They shoot these people when they're trying to reach for their ID. They investigate and track them down when all they're doing is trying to go to work, for example, right? When this already skewed data is entered into a predictive algorithm, it will deploy more officers to the communities that are already over-policed. For example, if a police notices a person wearing a sports jersey or having a brief conversation with someone on the street, it may be enough to include that person in LAPD's gang database. You are creating a convenient way to smuggle racist ideas about who will commit a crime based on where they live and who they know into the mainstream through so-called scientific legitimacy. We say no. We think what you are doing is you're creating a scientific veneer for racism that is unique to the system. We think that the police or the state in general has a responsibility towards these people in order to protect them and to continue to create anti-discriminatory systems and policies to make up for the failure that is decades of oppression, police brutality, and socioeconomic failures in these areas that makes these people commit crimes in the first place, and not just give data-driven systems and wipe their hands clean, which will ultimately mean there will be more leeway for the police department or more leeway for more negative biases towards people to occur, and therefore not solving the crimes or creating the illusion that they solve crimes when in reality all it does is it covers up more than it solves. You must oppose.